Hey guys, Perth Canine Craft here, so PCC. Today I'd actually like to talk to you about a document that NDIS brought out. I think it's 30, what did I say here? It's from 13 December 2021, which I thought was pretty cool. And they're actually talking about assistance animals, so including the dogs that they can fund. So they're giving you quite a bit of information here. So they're talking about what is an assistance animal, how do we decide if we fund an assistance animal, what information do we need to decide if we fund an assistance animal, how do you get funding for assistance animal in your plan. They also talk here about assistive technology and what principles do we, NDIS, follow to create your plan, which I think is really good. So I really like this document. It's quite good. There is probably about two, maybe three things that I would change because it's not quite accurate. But anyway, let's quickly run through it. I will put a link in the comment section that you can actually access this document yourself. You've got to make sure that you actually look at it quite frequently because they do try and update it quite frequently. So what is an assistance animal? So an assistance animal, it's an animal that's specifically trained to help you do things you can't do because of your disability. Now under that, there's a subcategory that says, so they'll only fund an assistance animal if it's effective and beneficial based on evidence and value of money. The animal is trained to actively do at least 3 tasks that you can't do because of your disability. The dog must pass the public access test as well. So I'll just quickly run you through a little bit more detail. So I'm going to talk about assistance dogs. I can't talk about other animals because I don't train other animals. So there are 3 categories of dogs that people might recognize. The first one's a companion animal. This is usually just a really well-trained pet. They can go where pets are allowed. Maybe they do something for you. If they provide companionship, that's great because that's what they naturally do. If they helped you to get out into the community, start conversations, that kind of thing, they're usually well trained, or they just naturally very good and you don't have a lot of problems with them. From there we have therapy dogs. Therapy dogs are actually like visitation dogs. So this is a dog with really good obedience, or they're naturally really people affiliated. They're really easy to take into places like hospitals, schools, things like that. They provide companionship for a group of strangers, or strangers in general. They're really good in therapy as well, but these dogs are not specifically always task trained, and also they do not. The public access test is not for therapy dogs, as far as I'm aware. The next category is assistance dogs. Now I will say here, emotional support dog is not a term we recognize in Australia. That's more an American term, so be careful because they actually do mention that in this document, which kind of contradicts what they say next. Okay, so an assistant animal, or dog in this case, is specifically trained by an accredited assistance animal provider to help you do things you can't do because of your disability. So a couple of things in that. First, this is a link that actually does not work on the document about the accredited assistance animal providers. I don't actually know where they got that from because essentially the dog training industry in Australia is unregulated. I know NDTF is actually a nationally recognized accredited course. So I'm qualified under NDTF for Cert 3 of dog training and behavior. Also task trained and 2 other classes, and can't remember what the other one was. So that's really important. The second thing is to help you do things you can't do because of your disability. NDIS is for people with disabilities that affect their lives and stops them from living normal lives if they don't have support. Now I will put in the link an awesome provider called IM Online. So if you're struggling to get onto the NDIS, or if you want to know, you're really struggling because you're, maybe language or whatever, or if you're a parent, a carer, support worker, or provider that want to know more about the NDIS, how you can add to the system, or you want to just learn how to navigate it, I'll put a link up for IM Online. They're absolutely fantastic and they do great workshops that I highly recommend everyone should at least do once if you or anyone you know is on the NDIS. I will say, however, just to add here, the NDIS was created I think in 2015, so it is quite a young system and it's national, which is a lot. So there's quite a lot of panel beating going on. So just be patient. These guys really are doing the best they can. Anywho, the next thing is they say the things that the dog, in this case, are trained for are things the animal wouldn't naturally do otherwise, like guiding you through crowded places. This is something that quite trips a lot of people because they're like, oh, but my dog provides companionship, helps me with my anxiety, that sort of thing. And this is the thing, if the animal is naturally doing it, it's not necessarily a task that they say. So if a dog is providing companionship or therapeutic support, even if you did train the dog to do, a couple of tasks, they just say here that that's not really, like, they know that animals are good for helping with routine and social engagement, but these things alone don't mean it meets the definition of an assistant animal or an assistance dog. So that's really important. So if this is the only thing that you're trying to get funding for an assistance dog, you won't get it. Now the cool thing is they actually here do have like NDIS funding criteria, which is really cool. And interesting, they also say here to help us NDIS decide if an assistance animal will be effective and beneficial for you, we have adopted the internationally recognized definition of assistant animals recommended by La Trobe University. Again, I just want to say be careful. Emotional support dogs not recognized in Australia, but they actually give you quite a few different links there to some content, so you can actually go and check that out. And they say here, we need to make sure the assistance animal is related to your disability, otherwise we can't fund it, because that's NDIS. NDIS is about disabilities. So if you're on the NDIS, you're getting support because, and it's really such a nice system, I quite enjoy it. So what they're essentially asking you is, why do we as the NDIS have to pay for this? Because how does it manage or improve your circumstances that's caused by your disabilities? You've got to know that. They're also saying here the dog must be trained to a high level of obedience, which means they can safely go to public places that are typically off limits to animals, such as train stations, cafes, hospitals, things like that. This is the public access test that you must pass. Also be aware, this is an annual test, so this dog has to retest every year. Okay, so it's not as easy as you think to just get an assistance dog. Now they say here we can only fund an assistance animal if there's evidence that the animal will be or is likely to be effective and beneficial for you, taking into account current good practices. I like this because this is a very big point that throws out a lot of people. When we say taking into account current good practices, we mean thinking about what's recommended or has been found to work well for other people in situations like yours. So you might find a couple of you might be the guinea pigs in the future to prove this. So, you gotta think about it. They have a document here about how we decide if we fund an assistance animal, so you can look at that. Make sure that you're actually meeting criteria. As if you don't meet any of this criteria, you're likely not to be successful, okay? Let's see, they do have a list here about what are the kinds of animals and key terms for animals and disability. On page 3, they actually talk here about, here it is, I missed that. Also talk about other types of animals which are not considered assistance animals. These are companion animals, so that's animal kept for company or fun, including pets. Emotional support animals, not recognized in Australia. An animal that provides emotional and informal support. Therapy animals, so therapy dogs. An animal that takes part in therapy activities that are led by a therapist or some sort of professional. They also talk here about facility animals and visitation animals. That actually falls under therapy dogs for some reason. Anyway, now here they say, we always consider your individual situation when we decide whether the support meets the NDIS funding criteria. So obviously because it's so individualized and relevant to the person, relative, But we generally won't fund an animal if it doesn't meet the definition of an assistance animal. If it doesn't actually support your disability, if it's not effective and beneficial and value for money. So the value for money is an interesting one. So I want you to think about, let's say for argument's sake, you get 7 years out of an assistance dog. How much is it going to cost you? So that includes the training, the maintenance of the training, food, health bills, vet bills, whatever. And then they'll look at assistive technology, which I do mention there. So alternatives which could potentially do the same thing in that same period. then you want to kind of compare the prices. So if the dog costs more, they're going to go for the assistive technology, and if it's the opposite, and that's really reasonable, I think, because remember, these guys have a certain amount of budget, which the taxpayers, I think, are helping us. So thank you, taxpayers. We really appreciate your support. And they only have a limited amount. So they'll always go for the cheaper option, because if they go for a cheaper option that's beneficial, effective, and value for money, that helps you, they can help more people. I mean, that makes sense to me. Let's see. We generally don't fund medical alert animals, even though they can sometimes be seen as a type of assistance animal. This is because there's currently not enough evidence about the effectiveness of these animals, having regard to current good practices. So again, there's not enough people out there who can say, yep, we've done it. If you do, maybe you should get into this. So maybe there's a couple of guinea pigs around. They do talk here about how do we decide if we fund an assistance animal, which is really, really important. But just really quickly, this means the animal assistance dog will help you pursue your goals. So in NDIS, you must have short-term, medium-term, long-term goals, and IM Online can help you with that. Will it help you with social and work activities? So can you take it to school? Can you take it to university? Can you take it to work? That sort of thing, which means you need permission, let people know. Is it value for money? We talked about that. Is it effective and beneficial for you? This is the thing. A lot of people don't realize the amount of work it takes to have and keep and maintain an assistance animal. It's a completely higher criteria. So if you think about feeding it, because this is the other thing, they need to make sure that the animal's welfare is going to be looked after. I have to do the same thing. So if I'm helping people training a dog, usually depending on the disability, they must have some form of support. So you've got to think about it. If you need support workers to look after the dog, how is that going to be effective and beneficial for NDIS if they're paying for the dog and the support workers? Something to think about. Does not replace the role of family carers, informal sport, community sport. So it just means there that doesn't replace psychiatry, for example, which makes sense because the dog doesn't diagnose and give you meds. So it's slightly different. All right, there are certain limitations to assistance dogs as well, just because dogs don't have opposable thumbs, things like that. To decide if we'll fund an assistance animal, it must meet all of the criteria. So you have to really go and check. If there's a box you're not checking, you need to figure out why. If you cannot tick that box, you might as well not do that. I essentially help people with training dogs for themselves at home, how to be safe out in the community in their homes. If you want to know more about that, just shoot me through an email. I'll put the email address or I'll put the website address down at the bottom for you, because that's how I get people to contact me, so I can actually organize calling you, arranging a free face-to-face or a phone call, because I'm a very busy person. Let's see. They'll look at quotes you get from your provider. So you've got to do your homework, guys. You've got to actually go look at purchasing the dog. What's the training going to cost? Is it a rescue? Is it an older dog? Is it a puppy? Like, pros and cons. We also need to know your provider is an accredited assistance animal provider. This is the one thing I find very frustrating. It's not really a lot of them around anyway, and I don't know how they measure that, and the link doesn't work. Again, there's NDIS funding criteria and principles we follow to create a plan. IM Online can help with that as well, just in general. I mean, not necessarily the assistance dog. They actually have a couple more things here that you can look at. A great one is they actually do talk about assistive technology. This is alternatives to what a dog can do. Before you even think about applying for this, go and look at that, because they're going to ask you, they actually do ask you for what alternatives have you tried, how long have you tried them, did they work, did they not work, and if they didn't work, why, and why would an assistance dog be a better, so beneficial and effective and value for money replacement for that assistive technology. So there's a lot of hoops you have to jump through, and there's a really good reason for that, guys. So they're not making it difficult to be difficult. They're making it difficult because it's very important. There has to be a standard that has to be maintained, because these animals are going out in public, and yes, they are helping people with disabilities, but Just because you have one means there's some responsibilities you must meet. There is no exceptions. If you do not meet the criteria of like the public access test, you're not going out in public with a dog where dogs are not allowed. Okay, health and safety is taken very seriously. Is the animal effective and beneficial? They talk about, public access test, which I don't think the link works, which is kind of frustrating. The thing is, there's criteria to meet, but every organization has their interpretation of it. So there's a little bit of leeway there, a little bit of gray area, which could be really frustrating. They also talk here about you need to think about whether you need an assistance animal to manage the functional impact of your psychosocial disability, because of PTSD, for example. So they do actually talk here about PTSD, and they've got a bit of criteria, so go look at that if you do suffer from PTSD. I mean, I myself personally started training a dog about 2.5 years ago, and it was probably about 8 months in when I realized actually I don't need the dog, so that was pretty cool. They do talk here about dogs for, people on the autism spectrum disorder. And then actually this is really good because they talk about the welfare of the assistance animal. If you cannot provide any of these things, you shouldn't have a dog. And I'm not just talking about assistance animal. I do talk about pets as well. I have actually met a few people that should not have a dog. Let's see. They also talk here about what is the role of family, carers, informal networks, and in the community. So that's really good. And then what else have they got here? A guide for informal supports. That's pretty cool. Oh yeah, we will not fund an assistance animal if it's used as a mechanical restraint. Mechanical restraint means the animal is used to stop or limit your movement to control your behavior. This is not talking about deep pressure therapy, okay? This is specifically talking about things like children on the ASD who are runners, because it puts the animal and the child at risk. Remember, you're talking about two sentient beings, and it could just be the one day that an animal gets a scare. Maybe just stepped on a thorn or got stung by a bee. He runs in front of a bus, pulls the poor child, that sort of thing. So this is kind of the things they're talking about. Another couple of things they need to know. Who will be the primary handler? So you can have a primary and a secondary. The assistance animal won't cause any risks to you and others. There's always risks to people because you're working with an animal. Neither you or the animal will be harmed in stressful situations, such as when you get upset or angry. This is really important because this is why there are so few assistance dogs in the world. You're actually looking for a pretty bomb-proof dog with a bit lower drive. They're not as easily stimulated by the environment. They're more aloof to strangers and other dogs. So there's a little bit of criteria you need to think about. And they need to have what we call good resilience, good recovery. So if they do get startled, they recover pretty quickly. So if you need some help with that, assessing your dog, just hop onto my website. And then of course, if someone needs assistance at school or university, there's a couple of things you need to look at, which I think is pretty cool. Does the assistant animal meet Commonwealth, state and territory laws? So government laws, the national laws, go look at the dog app. You do need to understand what on earth is going on there. You'll need to discuss with your provider, make sure the relevant state or territory tests for your animal are part of your service agreement. So that's really important. I'll take note of that, put that in my service agreement. I think that's pretty smart. What if you already have an assistance animal before approved? You can read that. What information do we need to decide if we can fund an assistance animal? Again, I think me and I'm Online will be looking at that so we can see how we can help people. It's pretty cool. Sorry, Jeanette, making more work for you. This lady's been working on this for 2 years and it's been pretty good. So here's a good one. You need to give us your quote, information that's in the assistance animal assessment template, and the provider will complete. We also strongly recommend that you have a service agreement. That's pretty cool. What is a suitable assessment? Which that's just good for people like me to know. Guide dog mobility instructor does the assessment. Guide dog mobility instructor must have specialized training and accreditation recognized by the International Guide Dog Federation. That's good to know. I'm currently in the process to see if I can get accredited with Guide Hearing and Assistance Dogs, which is, I think it's Queensland, I don't know, over east, and they have the highest standard to dog trainers must meet so that we can test dogs for the public access test. Who's an accredited assistance animal provider? Ooh, so maybe this one works. Yep, this looks like this link works. That's good. You can search the register providers finders tool. That's good. What is a public access test? They do actually take you through that very briefly. Don't know why they repeat the service provider agreement again, but who knows, repeating stuff's always good. How do you give us the information and evidence we need? How do you get funding for an assistance animal in your plan? They talk about that, which is good. There's quite a few things, quite a bit of information there that you can look at. What happens when an assistant animal retires and needs replacing? That's always a good one to know about, because if you do have someone that's going to need that forever, you need to know about it. There's appendix, so there's quite a few. So there's quite a few examples. So there's autism spectrum, low vision, psychological disabilities. There's a couple of case studies. That's what I'm looking for. So there's really a lot of information in here, guys, that you can actually have a look at. I would highly recommend it. I'll put the link to this information in the comments. If you guys have any thoughts or whatever, have a look at it. Yeah, and if you need any help, give us a shout out. So it's pretty cool. Talk to you soon.